I remember the sound of the envelope tearing, sharp, deliberate, like ripping through someone's arrogance. Inside, 2 pages of legal-sounding nonsense. Unauthorized structure, non-compliant modification, failure to obtain prior approval. They were talking about my mailbox. A plain black steel box mounted neatly to the same post it had stood on since the subdivision was built in 2008. I'd replaced the faded number decals with brass ones. Apparently that triggered a structural review. I walked to the curb and stared at it. The thing didn't even wobble. No tilt, no rust, just quiet efficiency, like me. Then I looked across the street. There she was, Carol Finnerty, HOA president, standing on her porch with binoculars in one hand and a clipboard in the other. She didn't even flinch when I waved. The next morning, a second envelope. This one was hand-delivered. No stamp, no shame. Same seal, same nonsense. Only the number had changed. $10,000 due in 10 days. Now, most folks panic at that point, but I don't panic. I manage a regional bank branch. My days revolve around signatures, liens, and leverage. If Carol wanted a paper war, she'd just declared it on home turf. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and started a new folder. HOA Fine Investigation. First document, bylaws.pdf. Second, plat map, county records. Third, Carol Finnerty, property, lien, status, XLSX. That last one was just curiosity, or maybe instinct. By noon, I'd already found the first hole in her claim. Section 14B of the HOA Architectural Guidelines. It required committee approval for structural changes visible from the road. Brass numbers didn't qualify. Neither did repainting, resealing, or replacing a mailbox like for like. I printed that clause in bold, slipped it in an envelope and addressed it to HOA Compliance Department, Aten, President Carol Finnerty. I mailed it with tracking. Next, I checked the HOA's financials. Most people forget those are public within the association. Quick login, password reset. Bingo. Their operating account was sitting at £12,431.22, barely enough to pay their landscaping contract. If I didn't pay their fine, they couldn't afford to sue. If I did pay, I'd be funding their next mistake. Either way, I had time. By Friday, Carol doubled down. A bright yellow notice taped to my door. Final warning. I peeled it off carefully, laid it flat on my desk, and took photos under good light. Metadata on. Timestamp visible. Then I drove to work. My branch sits 2 miles from the subdivision entrance. Small lobby, glass walls, polished tile. I greeted my tellers, logged into my terminal, and opened our loan portfolio dashboard. It took 10 seconds to find it. HOA Association of Willow Creek, mortgage account, 79231. Outstanding balance, $184,000, serviced by my bank. I leaned back in my chair, coffee steaming beside the monitor. My reflection smiled back at me in the screen. See, HOAs aren't magical entities. They're legal corporations. And corporations have debts, sometimes to the very banks they like to threaten. That afternoon, I made a single note in the internal system. Customer, Willow Creek HOA. Financial review requested by branch manager. Concern, leadership mismanagement. No action yet, just a flag. Saturday morning, Carol called a mandatory emergency HOA meeting. She stapled flyers to everyone's mailboxes, ironically violating her own rule about attachments to common fixtures. The turnout was decent. Maybe 18 homeowners in folding chairs on the lawn beside the community pool. She stood at the front with a megaphone like a dictator in Capri's. Her opening line was straight out of a bad courtroom drama. "We cannot allow one homeowner to undermine community standards." I let her finish her speech before I raised my hand, calm, polite. "Carol, can you show us where exactly the fine is authorized?" She blinked. "Section 14, unauthorized modification." I handed her a printed copy of the same bylaw, highlighted and annotated. "You mean this section?" A few neighbors leaned in. Phones came out. Someone started recording. She glanced down, lips tightening as she realized what I'd done. Cross-referenced her own rulebook. I added, "Also, I've noticed the HOA's balance sheet shows £12,431 remaining. That's barely one landscaping payment. Are these fines being used to cover operating losses?" Now she looked like she'd swallowed bleach. "Mr. Hart," she snapped, always formal when cornered. "That information is confidential." "Not within the association," I said evenly. Page 7, Section D, Financial Transparency Clause. You signed it when you became president. A few quiet gasps spread through the group. She ended the meeting 5 minutes later. That night, someone dumped a bag of mulch across my driveway. Petty. Predictable. I didn't call the sheriff, yet. Instead, I installed a $129 motion camera above my garage. Wi-Fi synced, infrared enabled, cloud backup active. At 2:14 a.m. the camera pinged. The clip showed Carol's husband, flashlight in one hand, spreading debris from a wheelbarrow. Perfect. I clipped the footage, downloaded the file, labeled it. Vandalism at 10, 18:02:14, M, MP4. Chain of custody. Preserved. Sunday morning, I sent one email to the HOA board, minus Carol. Per Section 9 of the bylaws, I am submitting documented evidence of targeted property damage and misuse of authority by the acting president. Please confirm receipt within 24 hours. No reply, but the email was read. Tracking confirmed it. Monday at work, I saw the system flag had been picked up by our regional auditor. He emailed me privately. "We'll review the Willow Creek HOA account this week. Good catch." That was all I needed to know. The wheels were turning. By Tuesday, Carol was back at my door, angrier, louder, but visibly nervous. She waved a new paper in my face. "You can't threaten the HOA's loan. That's illegal." I didn't even take it from her hand. "Neither is protecting my property, Carol. But vandalism is. And so is extortion." She froze at that word. Extortion. I pointed at my porch camera. The red light blinked steadily. "Smile," I said quietly. "It's recording." She turned on her heel and stormed off. That night, I got a call from one of the quieter board members, a retired accountant named Glenn. "Ryan, between you and me, she's been covering up a big overdue balance on the HOA's loan. She's been transferring reserve funds into her own business account." That explained the desperation. I thanked him, saved the voicemail, and added it to the folder. Evidence Glenn's statement, 4A. By the end of that week, I had everything lined up. I had video evidence of the property damage, bylaws that clearly proved there was no violation, financial records hinting at serious mismanagement, and internal confirmation that an official audit was already underway. Meanwhile, Carol had nothing but a fake fine, a bad temper, and a ticking clock counting down to her own downfall. The next step wasn't confrontation. It was precision. Because when someone abuses power, you don't just push back. You pull every thread until their authority unravels in their own hands. By Monday morning, the HOA audit was officially underway. I didn't need confirmation. The tension in Carol's voice when she called an urgent board session said enough. I showed up right on time, coffee in hand, wearing the same calm expression I used in loan negotiations. The board sat around the clubhouse table, 7 members, each with a thick binder of bylaws and expense sheets. Carol stood at the head like a general trying to rally troops she'd already lost. "Someone," she began, eyes darting my way, "has been tampering with the HOA's financial reputation by contacting outside entities." "Outside entities?" She meant my bank. I smiled slightly. "You mean the institution that holds your mortgage?" That hit like a dropped hammer. A couple of board members shifted uncomfortably. Glenn cleared his throat. "Ryan," he said carefully, We just need to verify some payment discrepancies before we can proceed with your appeal. Perfect. They'd opened the door. I slid a slim file folder onto the table. Inside, copies of my emails, photo evidence, and the full video stills from my driveway camera, each time-stamped, metadata intact, printed with chain of custody signatures. I figured you'd want documentation, I said. That's the audit-friendly version. Carol snapped the folder shut. You think you can intimidate me with paper? No, I said, still calm. Just facts. I stood and walked toward the wall-mounted TV, plugged in my flash drive. The screen flickered to life. 2:14 a.m. Carol's husband dumping mulch across my driveway. The room went dead silent. I paused the video right as he looked into the lens, flashlight glare cutting across his face. This, I said, is trespassing and vandalism. Under Section 8 of our state property code, it's also grounds for civil damages. And since it was committed by the spouse of an HOA officer in connection with a fine demand, it's extortion adjacent. Glenn muttered, "Oh, good Lord." Carol tried to speak, but I raised a hand gently. I'm not pressing charges, yet. But if the harassment continues, I'll file a restraining order and submit all documentation to the state HOA Oversight Office. Then I looked around the table. Anyone else want to sign off on that $10,000 fine? No one moved. That night, my inbox lit up. The auditor from corporate had forwarded his findings. Subject line, Willow Creek HOA, account irregularities. His email was short. Preliminary review shows fund transfers to non-HOA entities totaling $27,840 over the past 12 months, confirmed as fraudulent disbursements, escalating to legal. That was the sound of a bomb dropping. Quiet, clean, irreversible. By Wednesday, Carol's power was unraveling faster than she could control the gossip. Someone leaked the audit notice. Neighbors were whispering at mailboxes. Screenshots were circulating in the community Facebook group. One post stood out. If our HOA dues went to Carol's consulting company, we deserve answers. It had 40 comments in 2 hours. The next morning, my doorbell rang. This time it wasn't Carol. It was Deputy Hale, the same officer who'd once written me a speeding ticket on County Road 7. He remembered me. Got your report forwarded from the bank's fraud department, he said. Mind if I step inside? He took notes while I laid everything out. The fine letters, the video, the bylaws, the emails, even Glenn's voicemail. He nodded through every detail, occasionally jotting timestamps. Then he asked, You want to press charges? Not yet, I said. Let the audit finish. I just need the truth documented. He smiled slightly. Smart. You'd be surprised how many people skip the paper trail. I wasn't surprised. That's where people lose, on procedure, not passion. That weekend, the HOA email list exploded with one subject line repeated dozens of times. Special emergency meeting. Misuse of funds. I didn't need to imagine who called it. Glenn had taken over as interim chair. The clubhouse was packed, standing room only, neighbors clutching coffee cups and phone cameras. Carol sat at the far end of the table, pale and rigid, flanked by 2 board members who suddenly looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. Glenn cleared his throat. We have verified financial irregularities tied to the president's personal business account. The association's bank has confirmed a pending investigation. Gasps. Murmurs. A few sharp, I knew it, whispers. Carol tried to shout over the noise. This is a witch hunt. Ryan's manipulating everyone. I stood slowly. If that's true, Carol, then the auditor, the deputy, and your own treasurer must be in on it too. Because the numbers don't lie. People do. The crowd went silent again. I slid a new document across the table. My printed email thread with the bank's legal department. Notice of potential loan default due to fraudulent activity within governing officers. Her eyes wide. Ned. She understood exactly what that meant. If the HOA's governing body was found misusing funds, the association could default on its loan, the same loan she'd signed for. Her property, her reputation, her mortgage, all tethered to one reckless misuse of power. The next morning, my bank's regional office formally froze the HOA's discretionary spending account, pending review. Landscaping payments halted. Vendor contracts paused. By Monday, the once mighty HOA couldn't even pay for pool chemicals. Carol showed up at my driveway one last time, not angry this time, just deflated. "You've ruined me," she said quietly. "No," I said, voice even. "You did that when you used your position to punish neighbors instead of serve them." She stared at me for a long moment, then turned away. That same day, Glenn sent out an official HOA notice. Effective immediately, Carol Finnerty has resigned from her position as HOA president pending legal review. An interim committee will oversee operations. Underneath, he added one sentence that made me smile. All fines previously issued under her authority are null and void. I thought that would be the end, but 3 days later, I got a call from the regional legal counsel at the bank. "Ryan, just a courtesy update. The HOA's mortgage is technically in default. They've requested a restructuring. We're declining. You'll probably hear about a lien auction soon." It hit me then. The woman who tried to fine me 10 grand was about to lose her own board to foreclosure because she'd played with money that wasn't hers. That weekend, the neighborhood felt different, quieter. No clipboard patrols, no notes taped to mailboxes, just people mowing lawns, kids riding bikes, normalcy returning. I pulled the old brass numbers off my mailbox and polished them till they shined. Then I screwed them back on. No audience, no judgment, no fines. Before I went inside, I checked my phone one more time. The last clip from my camera showed Carol's SUV leaving the neighborhood for good. I deleted it. Some things don't need saving once justice is served. But that wasn't quite the end. 2 weeks later, the county newspaper ran a small front-page story. HOA president under investigation for embezzlement faces civil penalties. And just beneath it, a smaller headline. Local bank manager helped uncover scheme through routine audit. They didn't print my name, but everyone in Willow Creek knew. When the new HOA committee stopped by to thank me, I told them the same thing I tell every borrower at work. Accountability isn't personal, it's procedural. They laughed, but they understood. Now every time I drive past the clubhouse, I see the new sign Glenn installed out front. Transparency builds community. He asked me to come to the next board meeting. I said I might, if there's coffee. Because the truth is, I never wanted revenge, just fairness, and a mailbox that didn't cost $10,000. It had been 3 quiet weeks since Carol's resignation. The neighborhood finally exhaled. For the first time in years, nobody was measuring grass height or counting fence slats. Still, something lingered, unfinished business. The HOA's charter required a formal public accountability meeting before leadership could be permanently replaced. It wasn't optional. The state regulator had even assigned an observer to attend. I figured I'd sit in the back, sip my coffee, and watch the story close itself. But life has a sense of irony. Because I didn't just attend that meeting, I ended it. The clubhouse was packed again. Standing room only, with folding chairs scraping across tile and the low hum of nervous conversation. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and copy paper. Up front, Glenn stood behind the same long oak table Carol used to command. Only this time, the setup looked different. No fancy podium, no printed fines, just a single laptop, a stack of files, and a quiet determination in his posture. He tapped the mic. "All right. Tea, folks. Let's bring this to order." The regulator, a sharp-eyed woman in a grey suit, nodded from the side. "Proceed, Mr. Whitman." Glenn cleared his throat. "Tonight, We're here to close out the investigation into the former HOA president's financial activities and vote on structural changes to the association charter. He gestured to me. Ryan, you've been requested to summarize the audit findings for record. That wasn't in my plan, but the way every eye turned toward me said it wasn't optional either. I walked up, steady, not performative. Evening, everyone? The room hushed. In short, I said, the audit revealed that over 12 months, nearly $30,000 of HOA dues were transferred to a private company registered under the president's spouse. The transfers were disguised as consulting fees, no board approval, no vote. I clicked the remote. The projector displayed the paper trail, dates, account numbers, signatures. I'd redacted personal info, but the pattern spoke for itself. These documents, I continued, were verified by the bank, the county auditor, and the state HOA regulatory board. The funds are now under recovery action. Murmurs rolled through the room. I let it breathe a second, then finished. The association isn't bankrupt, but it's close. To recover, the board will need full transparency and possibly external financial management for at least a year. I stepped back. That's the reality. Nothing more dramatic than numbers adding up. The regulator nodded. Thank you, Mr. Hart. That matches our independent review. Then Glenn read the next agenda item. Proposal to dissolve the HOA and transition to a civic maintenance association. That sentence hit harder than any fine ever could. See, most HOAs think they're untouchable, but when the trust breaks and the insurance hikes hit, the community can vote to dissolve. It's rare, but legal. One by one, homeowners raised hands to speak. I never wanted an HOA in the first place. My dues went up, and the sidewalks never got fixed. Can we just handle things ourselves? It wasn't anger now. It was fatigue, the kind that comes from years of unnecessary control. Finally, Glenn called for a vote. All in favor of dissolving the Willow Creek Homeowners Association and restructuring as a civic maintenance committee. Raise your hand. Hands shot up across the room. A few hesitated. Even fewer stayed down. When he counted, it was 28-4. The motion passed. Just like that, the HOA that tried to fine me $10,000 ceased to exist. After the meeting, people stayed behind, not to argue but to talk like neighbors again. Kids ran around the pool fence. Someone brought donuts. Someone else offered to repaint the community sign. Glenn walked up to me, shaking his head with a smile. You realize you just helped end an HOA? I didn't end it, I said. It ended itself the moment it forgot what homeowners actually meant. He laughed softly. You've got a way with words. Ever think about running for local council? Not my kind of power, I said. A week later, I got one last letter from the HOA's legal counsel, technically the former counsel. It read, Dear Mr. Hart, this letter serves to confirm that all prior fines, penalties and fees assessed under the Willow Creek HOA have been rescinded. No outstanding balances remain. The association appreciates your assistance in resolving recent matters. At the bottom, a line added by hand. P.S. The brass numbers look great. I laughed out loud at that one. 2 months later, the subdivision's mortgage account officially transferred to county jurisdiction. The HOA's assets, what little remained, were liquidated to pay back the loan. The President's Consulting LLC was dissolved by the state. As for Carol, I never saw her again. Word was she'd sold her house quietly and moved 2 counties over. The property went for less than market value. Buyers don't like houses with headlines. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just mowed my lawn, waved at neighbors, and enjoyed the sound of peace. Then one morning, a letter from the state HOA regulator arrived. Short, professional, and oddly satisfying. Mr. Hart, thank you for your cooperation during the Willow Creek investigation. Your documentation significantly expedited our case. We encourage you to consider joining our public oversight panel. I read it twice, smiled, and set it aside. Some wars don't need repeating. Instead, I started writing again. Not reports this time, but stories. Stories about boundaries, about how authority can turn into arrogance if no one checks the math. People think justice comes from shouting. It doesn't. It comes from receipts. Now, when new homeowners move in and ask what happened to the old HOA, I tell them a simple version. Once upon a time, a few people forgot that power is borrowed, not owned. Then the math caught up. They usually nod, smile, and ask if we have any rules about mailbox colors. Just one, I say. Keep it upright. As the sun sets, I sometimes stand by that same mailbox, running my fingers over the cool brass numbers that started it all. The paint on the post has faded a bit, earned wear like the neighborhood itself. No more fines, no more fear, just homes, people, and quiet accountability. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't punishment, it's peace. Takeaway. If someone in power tries to twist the rules, don't argue louder, document smarter. The truth has its own gravity. And if you've ever stood up to an unfair HOA, drop your story in the comments. I read them all.